Hello everybody, Dave Neal here, stand-up comic and host of Bachelorette Recap, a guy's review. In this video, I am so excited to be talking to Emily Moynes. She wrote this book, Rising Up, Take the Charge, Break the Cycle, and Rebuild a Kick-Ass Life. And of course, as we will talk about, she is the mom of current Bachelorette contestant, bad boy, Blake Moynes. I've gotten to meet a lot of really cool people in covering Bachelor Nation, and Emily is right up there with the best. She has a great story about reclaiming her life, pursuing that authenticity, and sort of following her intuition to where she is today. You guys are going to really enjoy this conversation. So without further ado, and don't stop yourself from liking this video and hitting the subscribe button. And without further ado, enjoy my chat with Emily. Well, ladies and gentlemen, very excited to be talking today with Emily Mora Moynes. Hello, how are you?
Hey, Dave. I'm great. How are you?
Good. So I feel like I got to know you just from your book, which we're going to be promoting, Rising Up, Take Charge, Break the Cycle, and Rebuild a Kick-Ass Life. But of course, elephant in the room, you have a son who's on a dating show called Bachelorette. We're not going to get into it. We're not going to spill any tea or any of that stuff. But I did want to just call that elephant out, that is your son. But he's lucky to have a mom like you. So you're the star of the show right now. How does it feel being mom of a contestant whose dating life is on TV? How does that feel?
Oh, well, I'm all for it. I was all for it right from day one. Day one. Listen, oh my gosh, I watched the very first episode of it was The Bachelor. It was Alex. He picked Michelle. And then I think after that, it was Trista, who was the Bachelorette. And she picked Ryan. I've been watching The Bachelor, The Bachelorette for 18 years.
Wow. Blake
used to watch it, or not watch it. Okay, mother of the year out the window. He will not watch it, but he would knew about it from me having, watched the show. So I've always been a big fan. And I gotta say, I do believe that it works. I mean, look at Sean Lowe and Catherine, look at Ryan and Trista, look at Molly and Jason, though, Ari and Lauren, we could go on and on. They have viable, nurturing, loving relationships that came out of The Bachelor. They have families, they have children. It works. So when he said, Mom, I think I'm going to be on The Bachelorette. And I was like, what? How did that come to fruition? So all my kids, I'm all about life experiences, creating memories. And if you have an opportunity like that, go for it.
Amazing. Well, I'm on record of saying that I loved Blake in the fall when he was on Claire and Tayshia's season because of sex positivity, humor, and just willingness to be open. Now, I wanted to talk about that. As a Canadian, I feel like Canadians have such a healthier conversation with their sexual sort of life, as far as like birds and the bees talk. I mean, was that something that even happens? I never even got that from my mom. You know what I mean?
Okay, well, I'm Portuguese, 100% full-fledged, off the boat Portuguese. So I had very, very conservative, very strict upbringing. Sexuality was not something that was ever discussed at home. And I remember being engaged to my first husband, because there's two, being engaged to my first husband and not being able to show, there's no PDA in front of my parents. It was a very strict Catholic upbringing. So we didn't have that. And I made I wanted to really have a conscious effort to create the family when I was then married, sort of, that I never had when I was a child. And so sex was really never a big taboo subject in the house. I just want to preface that by saying this family doesn't go around, openly talking about everyone's sexual exploitations. And it's kind of cringy a little bit sometimes when I'm watching now and I'm like, oh, blah, 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 blah. I don't. But it's always been something that's been very healthy. It's not we're not over exploiting sexual content in the Moynes household, but we don't shy away from it. And there's a real big difference between, sex positivity and sex promiscuity. Big difference. So we've always been sex positive. And if my kids, I've always said to all of my children, when you're in trouble or when you want to talk about anything, I want you to come run to me, not run from me. So it's something that it's really not being that big of it. It's not a big deal. It's natural. It's normal. It's biological. There's nothing wrong with that.
But do you look down at the US and see all the purity culture that's happening here? Because we're a country founded by this Puritan culture, and we have these chastity events with the 14-year-old daughters and their fathers pledging virginity, and the shame and the guilt and all this stuff. Do you guys have any of that?
You know what? Well, you guys in the US, you need to all just get on up here to Canada. You guys you're just a mess. We do. I mean, I don't understand that mindset. I really don't, because, shaming people and, having such a closed mind is something that can be so natural and so healthy and so beautiful and so, can so connect you. I don't understand that mindset at all. I don't know that Canada gosh, our gay pride, parade, we are a different breed than you guys.
Well, it's funny because you have all of I always love looking at the different British colonies of the Australians are always having a good time. And I know I'm stereotyping a ton here, but the US is the most conservative first world country with a lot of social issues. And it's just the way it is, while I live in LA and lived in New York, and I live in the metropolitan cities that are a little bit more open about cities that don't settle down, at a younger age. I don't know what it is, but I was raised Catholic. So I understand the lack of conversation between parents and kids, and I just understand that there's this sort of shame that comes because something's not spoken about. So when I watch your family, I go, oh, this is nice. This is that we should be embracing this. But and for the most part, people are. But there is that percentage of people that watch the show that come from such a backwards minded place that they're not happy that Katie's sex positive, that they're not happy that people are having natural conversations. You just see that and you go, I can't believe this still exists in our country.
No, and it does exist in our country. And listen, I even got some comments. So I'm going to go back to when Blake was on Claire and Tasha's season, and there was this epic episode where he decided to sculpt this massive, can I say penis on your show?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, well, I call it, this massive, penis out of clay. And I even got some were you a little bit, and I said, no, unfortunately what they didn't show on that episode was that what Blake had sculpted was this big, massive dick for sure. I'm put it out there. He did do that. But what he had under the phallic symbol was the heart. And so what he was trying to portray, and they didn't show that, was that he was at a point in his life where it wasn't just about the sex, it was about the love and combining the both. So you've got the big penis, but underneath he had the heart. And he was trying to say that I'm done with just, having just mindless, not meaningful sexual encounters. I'm at a point in my life where I want both. I want to have a nurturing, loving, connection with someone with phenomenal sex at the same time. Now they didn't air that. They just showed this big, massive penis. And he's like, oh my God, and then he's aggressive, having very aggressive orgasms on camera. And it became this big thing where, oh my God, he's like a nympho. All he thinks about is sex. But, if they had aired that, it would have shown that I mean, who doesn't want the best of both when you're in an intimate relationship, having that love and having that connection? I think that's the best sexual encounter you can have, is when you feel so connected to someone else. And then you bring in this, this incredible, healthy experience that is, sex between two people. And, to me, sorry, I've got cat fur. Oh. And to me, dog fur, cat fur, my house is a zoo. Yeah, it's, I don't even know what the first question was that you asked, but definitely, I wish that more people could just have open dialogue. Katie is sex positive. She's not sex promiscuous. So it's healthy. And we all know from watching the show what she came through to get there. And I think that more people need to have open dialogue, talk to your kids. It's a healthy, natural thing for every single human being on the planet.
Yeah.
And so it upsets me a little bit when people come at him, for his overt sexual innuendos, when I think, it's just a natural part of life.
Yeah, we deal with this all the time when we look at the show and in our critical of the way things are edited, and realizing, like, look, I liked Blake from the get-go. I love the bros, the guys that are the athletes that are coming in there. You can tell when a guy is like well respected by the other guys. Yeah. Like you can see a lot of the dynamics throughout the show, even though it's highly edited. But my question for you is, okay, so my fiance Tasha, she was the firstborn daughter, and she claims to be counter dependent. Like her parents tried to kind of restrict her in certain ways as like a firstborn, like trying to, not let her go out as much and this and that. And whereas for myself, I was secondborn, and I was like, just come home when you come home. So as far as a mothering goes, have you noticed that you've treated your daughter different than your sons with regards to how you like intuitions with who they're dating?
Well, first of all, thank God, and I'm going to knock on wood, all of my children have always picked and had boyfriends or girlfriends that I've always really trusted their intuition, and they've all been fantastic. I've loved every single one of who they've dated. I don't really, being Portuguese, that was very much a thing, like if you're a boy, dad's going to throw you the car keys. Here you go, son. See you in the morning. But if you're a girl, like, you be home by 8:00. So that was very different growing up for me. I don't do that with my children. And I have a daughter and I have two sons. I trust them implicitly with their decision-making. If they screw up, they screw up. I trust them. I treat them the same. There was a time when when they first started dating, and this whole thing, it just became a thing where your boyfriend would come over and you'd go up and watch a movie in your room. And I was like, whoa, what is this? Like, I didn't have this. What's going on? And I kind of got an education from my children. And I really do believe that your kids can be your biggest spiritual teachers. And I got an education from them. I remember it was my middle son, Cody, that was like, Mom, it's not a big deal. Like, just people, like, we're going to literally go up and watch a movie. The door's going to be open. Like, people do this. Like, this is a thing. And I'm like, okay. And it was fine. It was fine. I'm not used to that. I didn't grow up with that. I probably would have gotten a slap across the head for that, for sure. But yeah, no, I never treated them differently. And I respected their decisions and I trusted their decisions.
That's so good to hear. It feels like a job interview. I'm like asking you all the questions I wish I could ask my own mom. I have a pretty good relationship with my mom, but there is a lot of topics I've still never really been able to have a heart to heart about, things that I really feel like my mom would benefit from just getting off her chest. My mom left my father when she was pregnant with me, so I didn't meet him till I was an adult. So she has a lot of weight with like how she raised us, but she did a really good thing. She got us out of a very toxic situation and protected us. Now you've had some issue, in your book talking about how, following, I think chapter 5, the consequences of not paying attention to your inner voice intuition. So when did you notice like you weren't being either authentic to yourself with your relationship, or like, when was the point that you kind of made the decision to like fulfill your own needs and not try to save the relationship or whatever?
Oh, wow. Okay. Now we're getting into some really loaded questions. Okay. So first of all, what I do want to make clear is because there's crazy articles out there right now from Blake being on the show. Articles written that I'm like, where are they getting this stuff from? And so what I do want to make clear is I've been married twice. And so my children all have the same dad. So I married my first husband in my early 20s. I think I was 23. And then I had Blake 24, 25. And so we were married so young. We literally just grew apart. And so he is a very involved father, and he's a great dad. And, he was a good husband. That was just, a situation where we completely grew apart, went our own different ways. And unfortunately, because now looking back, it's 20 some years later, that marriage failed. And now being older and being, 55, I think that marriage could have been salvaged. But back then, I didn't have the wherewithal to really sort of ascertain. I just didn't have the wherewithal. I think that's a whole other topic, but I want to make sure that everyone understands that Blake's dad, good guy, hands-on. He is not who I wrote the book about.
Gotcha.
The book is about my second husband. And wow, I described that marriage. I was with him for 15 years as the longest emotional roller coaster ride of my life. And I literally lost myself in that marriage completely. And like, so much so, are you guys ready? Like, is everybody ready for this? I was arrested twice for domestic abuse, thrown into a jail cell with a steel toilet in the middle of the room with the cameras pointing at it, watching me go to the bathroom. And I was broken beyond belief, and I still went back to him. And I was arrested because what I've come to learn when you're in a situation where your partner is your abuser and your savior, you have cognitive dissonance going on. You don't know what the hell is going on. You have such a mental mind fuck. Can I say fuck?
Yes.
I left 4 times, and it was my daughter in the end who, a situation with my daughter that jolted me into reality. And I thought, I cannot do this one day longer. I cannot subject my children to this. Although my children were pretty much by that point, adult children. It was really a situation that happened with my daughter when she was sobbing after an altercation that I had with my ex-husband that jolted me into reality. And I literally from that altercation went right to a lawyer's office and started divorce proceedings. And it was a divorce from hell. It was a divorce from hell. But I needed to go through that. I feel now, after having therapy and done a lot of work, I needed to go through all that to get to where I am today. And I cannot believe the person I became in that marriage. It shocks me. It shocks me.
Yeah.
I was.
Well, when I always look at situations like that, first of all, hurt people, and people bring out just such darkness in other people. And
yes.
It's just like a race to the bottom. So when you see that, it's so hard because on one end, you seem like a fighter. Fighters want to fight for it. Like you mentioned that you thought you could have salvaged your first marriage, and a lot of times you want to salvage even whether it's a job that's horrible, you're like, I'm going to just stick it out. And then eventually it's like, what sort of like bottom do you have to hit to just be slapped in the face to realize this just ain't it?
Well, for me, obviously, it wasn't being in a jail cell, peeing in a steel toilet. That was not it for me, which is like, for me, it was my daughter, hitting rock bottom and seeing her. She had come home from university. She was struggling with some, issues of her own, and she had come home from university, and we gotten into this. Her stepfather and I had gotten into this. Our fights were always. They weren't just. I mean, they were downright like ugly, and it was first thing in the morning, and it was loud, and it was ugly, and it was name calling, and it was just horrible. And I remember going up to her room, and she had come home for solace. She had come home for a soft place to land. She was away at school, and I told her to come home, honey, you know what, just you need to decompress. And then to go up to her room and see her, on her bed in the fetal position, just bawling because of what she had just heard. That was it for me. That was the last day that I spent.
Very interesting that it took like seeing the effects of your child rather than how much it was hurting you. And is it partly because like the fear of having a second marriage that's not working out, or is it the fact that you've already invested all this time? Like, what was keeping you?
So for me, that's interesting. That's a great question. Because for me, with this relationship, it wasn't the number one fear for women or men that, go through divorce is the fear of being alone. That was never a fear for me. Still remains not a fear for me. It's been 5 years and I've not had a relationship by choice. For me, it was a fear of, it was financial. And the reason why it was financial was, again, my whole life changed drastically. So before I became involved in this relationship, and in the book, I call him Richard, Dick for short. But before I got involved with Richard, I had a phenomenal job. I was doing well. I had already been divorced from my first husband, had my own house. I was doing great. Then I remarried to someone who had accumulated during the marriage a lot of success financially. And so I hadn't been working for about 10 years. It just blows my mind even telling you that. Like I had no financial independence. I was now, financially dependent on someone else. And I had become so accustomed to name brand everything. I was the name brand queen, and I'd become so accustomed to that lifestyle, and also not having any financial, I didn't have access to our bank accounts. I didn't have access to credit cards. Like, how do you even allow myself? How do you even allow myself to get into that situation? I had been having so much success on my own before getting into this particular situation that I was so afraid to leave. And it was so funny. It's so funny, Dave, because before my second marriage, I was doing okay, but I wasn't I never really thought about, it was never a concern. Finances were really never a concern. I always had more than enough, always. And then when I was with this person where we had multiple vacation properties, a BMW, a Mercedes, a Porsche, a summer cottage, properties in the States, I was always worried about finances. Always. I don't know where that came from. And so I thought, I can't leave. He will cut me off. He did. He will cut me off. And I just had this irrational fear of financial destitution. And that's what kept me there for so long.
So what would you recommend now with my relationship with Tasha? She's always been the breadwinner in our relationship because she's at the peak earning years as a model and all that. She's doing well, but she and I know a time's going to come when I'm the the guy with the sole job and she's at home with the kids or whatever the case may be. And so we've had tons of conversations about our finances, just also just like talking about sex, just to destigmatize. Some people don't like to talk about those things. It's taboo to have certain conversations. And you do get to see, if even if it's not with bad intention, if one person is the one bringing in the money, how quickly they can be like the one that's like, we're going to go vacation in this place, my choice. And then it's like, zip it, they got the money. And it's like, it's so quickly, it's so quick to see the power dynamic shift with all that. You know?
Yeah. Okay. So people listening, especially young women, girls, huge red flag, because I think that there's also, there's all forms of abuse, emotional, mental, physical, of course. But there's also financial abuse in relationships, which I didn't even ever really think about. Like when I was married and in that situation, and he was making most of the financial decisions, and I had always, had my own money, I didn't think of it as financial abuse when, if we'd have a fight and I'd go and get gas and he'd cut off my credit card and I couldn't, fill up my car. That is financial abuse. Yeah. That is. And so when you're with my first husband, we had joint bank accounts. There was never, what's yours is yours and what's mine is mine. And with my second, it was so different. And I think that if you're in a mutually respectful relationship, there shouldn't be, of course you can have your own, little, side, whatever, to maybe, I don't know, go get a mani or I don't know, or you want to get him a gift or you want to get her a gift and you don't want each other to see where it came from. That's fine. But I think if you are starting off a relationship where you can't even have a healthy, constructive conversation about your finances, you're already in trouble. That's one of the biggest reasons why a lot of relationships don't work. It's money. And so I would compel you, people that are listening, that, I've been doing a lot of talks in high schools with to young women, to look for those red flags in your relationships. And that's definitely one of them, 100%, the financial abuse that can happen in relationships. And especially when there's an imbalance of power in terms of who's bringing in more money, and which is fine. You can have one person bring in more money and then it, oftentimes the dynamic changes, but you need to be able to have a healthy, constructive discussion and be on the same page with how you look at your finances, and just make sure that your partner feels like they're an equal in your financial life.
Yeah. And it's a great example for showing mutual respect, to start something with so basic as like the simple currency exchange, the simple like communication, like a guy, if he buys a brand new truck without, even consulting his lady, it's like, what are we doing here? Like, we want you to get the truck, but what are we doing here? Like, we're just doing those things without each other's input.
No, it's not cool. And it can go the same way. It's not cool because, if you're sharing, I shouldn't say it's not cool. It's cool if you've had the conversation. If you've had the conversation and you're both on the same page, then by all means, go get your truck. But if you're coming home with a truck and you haven't talked to your lady that you just dropped, whatever, 10 grand, 30 grand, 100 grand on the truck, that's not cool. Even if you can afford it, it still leaves her out of the conversation. It leaves her out of that. You want to build your relationship together. Then it still leaves her out, and which inevitably, for me anyway, it did, made me always feel less than in that relationship. I had no voice. It didn't really matter because he was going to do it anyway. So it always made me feel inadequate and less than, and definitely never a partnership.
Now, your story, I'm sure, is going to resonate with a ton of people, because I know I get messages all the time, some heavy stuff. I get messages all the time. The audience is 91% women. And of course it's Bachelor related. So everyone's, looking at their relationships and analyzing them. It's all Bachelor fans. And I know plenty of people that have spoken to me about, having gone through a divorce, and then they're moving out on their own. And so the question becomes, I know this from my sister who's got 4 kids. Her identity is the kids. It's their survival. It's every practice. It's hockey. It's everything. Now, once the kids are adults and they're moving on, what does it look like finding out who you are now? Like reintroducing yourself to that.
Do the kids ever fucking move on? Oh my God. Okay. Well, first of all, the one thing I do want to mention to people that are going through a divorce is you have to accept the fact, unequivocally, 100%, your life is going to change, and there are going to be sacrifices, and there are going to be compromises. You probably will have to sell your matrimonial home. You probably are going to have to cut back on your cable, your whatever you have, because I had to do all of that. I sold my matrimonial home. I didn't have TV for the longest time. Now, mind you, I built 2 businesses since that time, and both quite successful. And I wrote a book. So hello.
Yeah. Hey.
So you have to realize that, men or women, your life is going to change financially, for sure. For me, after I got divorced the second time, I made a conscious decision that I was now going to be focusing on me. Well, I didn't really have time anyway to date or to get into that dating world, because I knew I needed to. I was hitting 50, and I was a little bit freaked out. It was daunting. Like, what am I going to do? Who's going to hire a 50-year-old? Like, how am I going to provide for myself? I knew that support was not going to be an option here, because I fought in court for many years, and that was not going to be an option. I was left to have to my own devices. And so I also did not want, it was it was such a big thing for me to not have men coming in and out of my home, dating when I still had my daughter at the time living at home with me. That was not something I was interested in. And I was really, really focused on me now, creating the best version of Emily, getting the old Emily back, the old Emily that, was literally supporting herself since she was 14 years old. My parents came from Portugal with like $237 in their pocket. We had to fend for ourselves, and it served us well. We became very resourceful, and I had to get back to that. So I was not interested in dating. I was really 100% focused on creating that best version of myself and making sure that my children, although, adult children, were good and mentally good and settled, and that I would always be available to them. And so, everyone is now moved out of my home, and it still continues to be that, Dave. I still am pretty much focused on doing what I want, when I want, with who I want. I have not really dated, not that I'm not closed off to it, but here's what I say about that. Unless now being 55, unless someone's presence in my life right now feels better than my solitude, then I'm not interested, because my solitude feels pretty damn fucking good. Yeah. So I'll find that person that, can come into my life, and it feels better to have you in my life than have my solitude, which I embrace. And I think everyone should embrace solitude at some point of their lives. It feels so good to be able to learn how to live with yourself, by yourself. Then I'm good. I'm good.
I love hearing that.
Let's just put that out there. I would love to be in a relationship, but you become a little bit more discerning and discriminating the older you get. And there's nothing wrong with being alone. Alone does not mean being lonely.
I love the saying that a relationship is the dessert, not the main course. And the main course is you taking care of yourself. Yeah. Now, did what you were looking for in a guy change after you had kids? Did it become like a different, like now is obviously, if you're younger Emily, you're looking at like not just who am I going to marry, but are we going to make good kids? And then now if you're not trying to have kids, does that conversation become something different? Like I just want someone to travel with me or whatever.
Oh, yeah. Well, absolutely. Okay. So I don't know what happened to Emily in my 30s. I don't know. I was literally, was I hypnotized? Like, was I put under a spell? Because the person I chose as my second spouse was I don't even have a word for it. I definitely not the person I'd want in my life. Today, when I look for a partner, it looks very, very, very different than back then. So I'm elated with who I chose to be the father of my children. He's a great guy. He's a good guy. He was always hands-on, and is still involved in their lives. And we never worked out. I'm happy with that. Thank you, God. Thank you that worked out in that regard, that he is the father of all of my kids. Today, it's funny you asked that question, because I just had a conversation with a girlfriend, and we're watching that Netflix Sex Life. And the question was, okay, are you team Cooper or are you team Brad? Have you seen it?
I have not, no.
Oh my God. Okay, girls, if you're thinking of getting a divorce and your sex life is a little lackluster, don't watch it. Don't watch it. But it's are you team Brad or you team Cooper? So Cooper is the husband, and Cooper is the guy that is, like, okay, sex isn't great, but he's reliable and he loves her. He adores her, and he adores their kids, and he adores their life. And he's a great provider, and he's beautiful to look at. And then you've got the lover, who is gorgeous as well, but, not very reliable, blah, 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 not stable. And it's like, well, that's a no-brainer. I am 100% team Cooper. I want companionship with someone that I can trust, that is stable, that is mutually respectful, that will treat me well, that is kind, that is considerate, that is honest, that is loyal. Like all of those things now, I want those. That's not too much to ask.
Yeah. The longer, if you're not coming into a relationship needing anything like transactionally, you can bring your best version. It's like going to a job interview for a job you don't necessarily need. You're like, all right, let's see what you can do for me. Okay. And that's kind of what, now I know, cause I know people are going to ask me this, is reuniting with the first husband off the table? Is that something that might ever happen?
Oh my God, that's so funny you say that, because I actually write a little bit about that in my book, where I question myself. That is off the table. He is now remarried. That is off the table. But so I just put it out there. I know you follow my Instagram. So I'm looking at starting a podcast to talk about all these kinds of things. And I put it out there I have like 85% women follow me. Give me some topics that you want to talk about, or what's like, what are your burning questions? What's on your mind? And a question I got that I thought was really interesting was, do you regret getting divorced? And I thought, well, that's an interesting question. Like, is this person maybe contemplating getting divorced? And she's like, I don't know, like, do I want to pull the plug? Or has she gotten divorced and she now regrets it because she's lonely, or maybe she's financially struggling, or perhaps she's seen her ex with the new love of his life and she's like second guessing it. And I'll tell you what is difficult now, being 55, as opposed to, when I decided to divorce my first husband at 30, is now I'm in my years where it would be really, really nice to have those family moments, everyone as a family. Like I see my kids go up to the family cottage, which him and I used to own together. And sometimes, and if he sees this, he's going to go, oh, I didn't know that. I get a little bit like sentimental when I see them having their family time at this cottage that we had when we first got married. And that's when I think, that marriage probably could have been salvaged. And do I regret it? No, because I don't believe in regret. And I believe that I am exactly where I need to be at this time in my life. But yeah, I wonder how many women or men do regret that decision later on in life, because we're getting to a point where, yeah, retirement, right, and companionship, and a lot of the stuff that was important then isn't so important now. But to answer your question, no, it's off the table, and that's okay. We're still family.
Yeah. Well, when you mention, when you think about how you act when you're in your 20s or 30s, I mean, the ego, it's a vicious thing. The limbic system, the fight or flight, whenever you're in a argument, we take things so personally because we let someone so close into our heart. They've got all the access codes to, it can be very dangerous. You talked about romanticizing and how that happens after a breakup. So it sounds like, I mean, the whole cottage thing is the romanticizing of what could have been, but clearly the relationship wasn't working out for other reasons. But I guess you can romanticize pretty much anything you did in the past. Even drug addicts, in their 12-step programs, love a good romanticizing of the benders, but they know the reality it was a horrible thing.
Yeah. So romanticizing is actually something that is really prevalent. It's really prevalent when you sort of at the beginning of a breakup, and you've got to be really careful with the romanticizing phase of that breakup, because inevitably what happens when you're romanticizing is that all the shit that was in that relationship, all the fights, all the, accusations, all of the ugliness, gone. And the only thing when you're romanticizing that you can think of is all the good times and how sex was great. And I remember when we went on this vacation and we did this and we did that. And then if you don't get out of that romanticizing phase, inevitably that's when these couples have continual makeup, breakup, makeup, breakup, makeup, breakup. It's that romanticizing phase that sets into your brain, and it happens with the majority of breakups. And a lot of times that's when you see people getting back together, because you get into the romanticization of that relationship, and it's the only thing that comes to the forefront, and all of the crap is gone. So you've got to be cognizant when you're starting to romanticize, and immediately change that thought process and think, oh yeah, he was a real asshole when he
yeah, I wonder what that survival instinct is to wax poetic. There's something in there that we think of the good things and what we'll miss, and then it takes like a best friend to be like, no, don't you remember what he did? And it takes friends to bring the receipts there.
Yeah, no, totally does. It totally does. I went back four times because of romanticizing, and it was always about there's also cognitive dissonance that happens, and cognitive dissonance when you have two opposing thoughts. So it was like, okay, yeah, well, he was a jerk here, but you got to take the good with the bad. And okay, yeah, he was an idiot here, but okay, yeah, but not every relationship is perfect. And you have these opposing thoughts that really keep you sort of complacent and stuck. And I think that, I have so many friends that I'm like, what are you doing? Don't go back. Nothing is going to change.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Did you have a friend group or because I know from your Instagram now, you probably do you lean more heavily on your friends now that you're out, or was it something where you just weren't able to digest what they were telling you?
My friends didn't really know, for the most part, what was really going on in our marriage. I hid that because, Dave, if you put that out there, then you have to deal with it. If you put out there what's really going on, okay, I'm just going to say women that are in abusive, like physically abusive relationships, a lot of times they hide it, because if they put it out there, they're now forced by their parents, their friends, or whatever, to now take action. They have to now deal with it. You've put it out there. So I think for me, if I kept, everything sort of, swept it under the rug, kept it quiet, because I was, from the outside looking in, I had this amazing, fabulous life. I wasn't working. I was jet setting around the world. I was driving, luxury cars. I had luxury vacation properties. And so people from the outside looking in were thinking like, oh, she has everything. Really inside, I had everything and I had nothing. So I didn't really have friends that knew what was going on because I hid it. The ones that sort of would pick up on subtle innuendos every now and then, when I did eventually tell them that I left, then they would say to me, I thought that one night, do you remember that one night when we were out for dinner and it felt like, you were just like, I gotta go. Like, he's at home. He's, oh my God, it's 9 o'clock. I gotta get home. They'd be like, well, that's not right there. But nobody really ever spoke up or said anything. And so I kept the truth from a lot of them. Today, they're my tribe. 100%. They are, I couldn't have gotten through my divorce without them. I could not have.
It makes sense when you're talking about that. I'm sure a ton of people would relate the idea of like protecting your abuser, or just protecting the idea of something. And I'm sure now with social media the way it is, it's even worse. It's like people don't want to have that press announcement on their Instagram that they failed. And it's not, failure is a term, right? It's not failure. You're moving on. It didn't work out, but like it's not game over. Do you have a feeling of like making up for lost time from all of that? What's the feeling that you're going through right now, as far as just like having picked up the pieces and now being 5 years past that? Like, is it all just a distant memory?
There's definitely still triggers, which if any women are watching this and going through it, I mean, a lot of women will go, what are you talking about? It's been 5 years, like, get over it. But there's always triggers for sure. And there's times, and again, that whole romanticizing thing or cognitive dissonance doesn't just go away. Like, we used to have a beautiful property that we would vacation every summer. So in the summertime, when I see the boats, I live on the beach. So when I see the boats on the lake and stuff, it brings me back to those times. And so, am I making up for lost? I'm not really. I mean, I'm making up for lost time in terms of working on me. That is 100% what I want to be doing now. And it's actually, it's kind of nice when I have friends and they're bitching about their husbands, or, just stupid, silly things, that they get. They're like, oh my God, if I have to tell them to pick up the socks one more fucking time, I'm going to lose my mind. I'm like, yeah, I get it. So making up for lost time in terms of doing what I want to do. And I have to tell you that, my whole thing is about rebuilding a kick-ass life. That's what my book says, taking charge of your life, break the cycle, rebuild a kick-ass life. And rebuilding a kick-ass life, people ask me, well, what is that? What is it? You had a kick-ass life. But to me, I didn't have a kick-ass life. I had stuff. I had a lot of stuff. A kick-ass life to me now, talk about making up for life, lost time, is living life on my own terms, 100%. To me, that's my kick-ass life. Having the freedom, having peace of mind, having, walking into my home knowing that it is full of love and there is not going to be any, chaos or eruption. It is just peace of mind, living life on my own terms, having a voice, using a voice. I'm going to be using my voice. I lost my 15 years. My voice is going to be heard. And I started that with my Instagram and my Facebook, Rebuild a Kick-Ass Life page. That is chock full of, inspirational, motivating, empowering, because I left that relationship and I'm like, no, fuck that noise. I'm done not being silent. I'm done. So that's where I'm making up for lost time in that regard.
I think that's great. It sounds like this podcast is going to be right up your alley. You got.
I'm so excited.
Do you have a launch date or when are you thinking?
I'm thinking I'm probably going to launch it mid-August.
Okay, great.
There's
Well,
there's strategic plan why, but that's why.
that sounds great. And I will promote it over here on my end. And I wanted to let people know that I'll put the link to your book. People can go buy that. I think it's great. I think you're speaking for people that go through, everyone goes through an identity crisis where they're like, what am I? What am I doing? You probably might not realize this in the US without having health insurance. Every job's held over our head. Like, well, you don't want to leave that job you hate because they're going to cover your, if you slip on ice. It's like our country's in an abusive relationship with how we're being held onto certain things. And this pandemic shows people, this pandemic's like a divorce from the way reality was, where you go, what were we doing? What did we spend 10 years hustling so hard for? Like, we got nothing out of it. We're not doing what we want to do. And I think a lot of people are having that rising up on their own. So it's great that you've got this message and having had come out of it, you can show like, hey, it gets better. Stick to it, be authentic, and just trust.
Yeah, no, well, did you read the very last page in my book?
I did not.
Okay, well, that's very much about that, about just, faith isn't about, everything being okay. Faith is about being okay, no matter, just trust that you'll be okay, no matter how things turn out. So when you said that kind of, that sort of brought that to light. But I think that this pandemic, as shitty as it has been and as devastating as it has been, and it's been financially devastating. I know I own 2 businesses, so I get it. It's been very devastating, but also I think it's also really given a lot of people a reality check and perspective, and what is really important. Like, you're now working, you're working for yourself, and there's just no, I'm such an optimistic person that I know the pandemic has, it's wreaked havoc on so many levels, and people have died and businesses have closed and families are struggling. But I think also it has really put a lot into perspective in terms of, what really, really is important. What's the bigger picture in life? And I try to instill that in my children all the time. That's why with Blake, like, going back on second time, yes, do it, go for it.
Absolutely.
Life and experiences and collecting memories and love and family, and that's what's important. The almighty dollar is important. You've got to live, but it's not the end all and be all. I know, I've been there. I've had it. I lived that with money. Finances were not an issue. I gave that all up. I walked away from that to have authenticity.
What a great way to end this. Thank you so much for talking to me today about all this. I think you've got a lot of great advice for people, and you've showed the ability to weather some tough times in your life and come out even more authentic.
Thank you. Well, definitely not a Bachelorette recap today, but thank you. It was great being here. And I just think it's an important message to put out there. You can overcome anything with the right mindset.
Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Leave a comment. Let me know what you guys think. You can go follow Emily at Emily Moynes. Tell her you heard her here, and everyone have a great day. See you next time. Bye, everybody.